This is the Funky Old House YouTube channel. We'd like to show you the construction of our stone steps. This is the house when we first bought it. Here's a few months later, so you can see the steps falling apart. You can see the box we had there collecting bricks that were falling off the stairs. Here's after we ripped the stairs out with a sledgehammer. We did not know what would be underneath, but we were happy to find a cement incline that we could build steps from. There are some of the rocks that we were collecting. We collected rocks from all over, even when we were on vacation in Lake Superior. And in some cases, we even bought rocks on the internet and had them shipped to our house. Here's my son unpacking some. He's unpacking beautiful purple, pink, and red stones that we bought from Mexico for a very reasonable price. I put cement in the bottom step area and held it in place with cinder blocks. To be honest, I had no idea what I was doing or what I was going to do with this project at this point, and I made several mistakes on this bottom step, but not mistakes with the structure and strength of the step. Here's the next morning. You can see it's drying and some of the beautiful rocks. This step's different from some of the others due to the fact that I made so many mistakes early on, and this was basically my learning step where I figured out what I was doing and I sat back and came out with an overall plan. From this I built the second step. Here you can see some of the rocks that we had picked out, putting them in place, coming up with a plan on where to put them. We chose the most beautiful, unusual rocks that we could find, one specifically pleasing to us. You'll have your own taste when you build your own steps, if that's what you plan to do. Here you can see I am halfway through the construction of the first real step that I built. Again, this was a tremendous learning portion of the process. I made many mistakes that were able to be covered up later. I learned so much on this step in spacing out rocks, learning to get the consistency of cement correct, and so forth. You can see my blue bin. I mixed cement in a very primitive fashion there with a shovel. The old sidewalk you can see is falling apart there and will be replaced at a later time. In general, I made the rocks rise up over the cement base where someone will step on the top portions of the rocks sticking up. I just simply liked the way this looked, and after testing out this first step the next day when it dried, I learned that it was a very comfortable and thoughtless way to walk along these steps. But to be honest, I was going more for looks than functionality, even though the functionality was very successful. This is immediately after construction of this step. You can see the wet cement, and again, this is a different step than later on, as later on I chose to do different sorts of designs. You can see the blue turquoise stone there. You can add your own artistic preferences as you wish. I simply was laying out stones in a way that was aesthetically pleasing to me. You can also see that I'm choosing stones that in some cases are step-like, especially in high traffic areas such as on the left edge there, which very much fit precisely in there to function just as a step. But in most cases, I had no interest in making the rock conform in any way to being like a step. I just chose rocks I liked and hoped that the step's overall size and strength and structure would form the basic feel of a stair, which is precisely what happened. You can even get an audience or friends or family to work with you, because people will find the project very interesting and quite beautiful. Here's a time lapse of me putting rocks in place in the second half of this first completed step, which is the second step. Now I'm putting the cement in place, watering it down, which is called setting the cement, putting the cement in place, and then putting extensive water on it, and then putting the rocks in place. Very commonly with a spray bottle, washing off rocks when cement splashes on them to keep their surface perfect and beautiful, since that's the whole point of this sort of a project. Here's the completion of that step in time-lapse. And here's the step itself. Find your own techniques, which work best for you, and much practice will be needed, and allowance for many mistakes in the early parts as you learn what you're doing, especially if you don't have much experience in working with concrete. Overall, the process should be enjoyable, or else there's simply no point. If you're not excited about building steps like this, then you should not try it. This is just simply for artistic pleasure. Here's a time lapse of repairing the mistakenly made front part of the first and lowest step. Setting rocks in place, putting cement in between them, setting the cement, making sure there's enough cement in the bottoms, underneath the rocks, putting rocks in place. This step does not resemble the remaining portions of the stairs. The bottom step is quite different due to the errors made in learning and the trial and error process. Here's the finished result of the first two steps. Here's a time lapse of putting the rocks in place for the third step. It's very good to do this where you can sit back and look at how the rocks appear to you to make sure you like what you see. Always go by what your inner feelings tell you if you really like the way you're arranging the rocks. It's best not to do what you think you should, but rather what you feel you want. Then you'll be most pleased with the product in the end. There are the rocks in place, getting ready for the long process of working on cement. Each step would take me anywhere from 3 to 4 hours. Put plastic down on lower steps since you will be walking on them, and you don't want to track cement on the stones on the lower steps. Be prepared with a water bottle for dropping cement on existing rocks or on the top of rocks on the steps you're building, and spray the cement off relatively quickly. There's setting the cement right there with the hose. I later used a water bottle so I could have more control than a hose would give, as it's very important to control how much water is moving around so you don't have it fall in the lower areas. I had friends to help me out, handing me rocks to make the process go smoother and ease the workload. It's very important to not have any gaps or air pockets or anything in the cement, especially if you live in colder areas where there will be freezes and water can collect and expand and damage the stairs. That's the point of setting the cement with water. You create the cement, place the cement down, and then put water on it to set the cement. There's what I did right there, setting the cement. You can see me routinely and regularly spraying off rocks with the water bottle. This is because spilling cement on the rocks is very common and expected. If you try to not do it at all, you will just get frustrated. Just expect you will do it and enjoy cleaning off the rocks and looking at their beautiful wet appearance while you do. Find rocks that are most appealing to you. Search for them in the forest. Go on walks. Look for them on the internet. Whatever is the most appealing color to you, shapes, arrangements, is what you should do. I would purposely choose arrangements that did not make sense together, colors that didn't match, shapes that didn't go together, as I was looking for the most eccentric and perhaps could be called primitive look in our stone steps for our house. Here is the third step. You can see the turquoise rock there in the middle, carefully placed there so it could be seen from the road. This is immediately after construction. You can tell from the first to the third step that I'm getting more practice and more skill. Here's a time lapse of me putting rocks for the third step in place. I would sit back and look at the arrangement of rocks, determining what felt best for my specific interests. The rocks do not have to be exactly in place, of course, just a rough idea so you are ready when the cementing process starts. Often this process would require me to make trips to a nearby landscaping company to look for exactly the rock I wanted for a specific place on the step. I would take different views from far away and close up, from the street and different places in the yard to see how the steps looked for my specific interests. Here's the arrangement I came to for this fourth step. On this fourth step, I really felt like I was starting to get in a groove for this project. Here is a time lapse for working on this fourth step. You can see the plastic down, firmly secured with bricks and cinder blocks, making sure it doesn't move. I would use 6mm plastic, something very strong and thick, to assure no rippage or other things that could cause significant interruptions during the process of making the steps. You can see me washing off rocks regularly again with the spray bottle. The spray bottle will be your best friend during this project. As you can see, I was not concerned with making steps that were perfect for walking on. You can see gaps between the rocks and so forth. The third step from the right there, the pink one, I purposely chose to not be boxed off in the proper way, but rather the point sticking out, because that's simply how I wanted these steps to be. You may choose to do things however you want for your preferences. Very important in this project. If you're in a hurry or have any kind of time constraint, you might as well just not start. Doing the job right is the only requirement, not time, not in a timely fashion. You will make mistakes and get very angry and frustrated if you have any time constraint placed on this project. Mixing cement, finding rocks, setting the cement, keeping rocks clean, all these things are very time consuming. You should really think of this more as an art project than a project of building functional stairs, even though if you do it properly, the stairs will be extremely strong and functional, as these stairs in fact turned out to be. As you can see, this step took far longer. That will happen. Some steps will take a certain amount of time, others will take much longer. I found that if I had stones that reached from the top to the bottom of the height of a specific step, made it by far the most easy. When I stacked stones on top of each other in any way, or had stones that did not reach all the way down to the base of where they're resting at the bottom of the specific step, would cause significant additional work. However, I did like the look of stacking stones or using ones that did not reach the full height of a specific step, so sometimes I would indeed use them. The tan, brown, and honey-colored rocks we gathered from Lake Superior on our vacation over the summer weeks before. We had boxes full of them coming home from Lake Superior, where we spent our vacation. It was during that time and seeing those rocks on the beach, how beautiful they were, where we finally started to really formulate what we wanted to do with these broken steps that we had at home at our house. Here you can see the completed step immediately after construction. It's interesting how different stones look when they're wet versus when they're dry. It's very important to consider the color arrangements, how they'll be when they're wet and when they're dry. And also that cement, when you're working on it, is very dark gray, but when you're finished working on it, is almost white. So when you're laying stones down in cement, when you're performing construction, is not how they will look when the cement dries and is nearly white. Something to keep in mind. And here is a time lapse of the second to last step, assorting the rocks in a way that was pleasing to me. I became more bold and daring as the project progressed on the higher steps. And those are the steps that I liked more when the project was finished. Here's a time lapse of completing that step. The paper towels are there for catching water. Water often will seep out of cement, or often you will be wiping off rocks and cleaning them off with your water bottle, and you will want to catch the water from running all over and bringing small pieces of cement onto the lower rocks. There is a top view of the first 5 steps. As you can see, the top to the bottom looks very different. As my tastes changed and my practices altered as well. Here's a time lapse of the top step. This step took about 15 bags of cement, the 40-pound bags, as there was extra space on the top as it started to go into the upper walkway, which will be replaced at a later time. The black rock is falling out, so I replaced it with 2 other rocks stacked on top of each other. You can see the green cross on the right. You can add inspiration in any way that you want, as you feel. It's best to be bold, since you're the one that's going to be enjoying these steps more than anyone. This morning I completed the other side of the last step. During this time I was concerned that it would rain, which would greatly disturb the project, as I would have to stop possibly having cement dry when I didn't want it to and cover up the project. But I was fortunate and there was no rain. This very important part of the video shows the process that I used, where I would often put rocks in and then set the cement around the rocks. This would also clean off the rocks as well. Often I would have to catch the water with the paper towel, as you'll see in a moment, as water would collect in the grooves. You don't have to do this much detail, or you can do more. This is just what I wanted to do for this project, because I knew exactly how I wanted it to look. Rocks are beautiful. They're the abstract artworks of God, and we wanted our house to be of that energy rather than the energy of the straight-edged architectures of man. That's just our preference. You should enjoy yourself in letting your mind wander to what your preferences will be. This is setting the cement. And there's the final project. Our house is very old, so it's imperfect. The entire stairway is slanted slightly, but that's what we love about old houses. And that's why we can do a project as eccentric as this, because it fits into a house setting in a neighborhood such as we live in. Here's a top view of the final product. Just looks like a rock pile, a beautiful artwork of God. And as you can see, the steps are very functional. There's no problem walking on them. We found pizza delivery people and so forth, just walking right up them without even thinking anything of it. We want to thank you for watching. Look for more videos in the future from the Funky Old House YouTube channel. Peace to you.